What's up, guys, and welcome to the SGN podcast. I'm your host, Diego, and today we're going to be talking about the Champions League results from last night. And as of right now, I'm recording at 3 in the afternoon on Wednesday, which means the United versus PSG match has not taken place, and neither has, of course, the Roma versus Porto match. I'm going to be talking about Borussia Dortmund versus Tottenham, as well as Real Madrid versus Ajax. And then, of course, I'm going to be talking about UFC 235, some of the results, and some of the major talking points that came from that event. And I want to go ahead and start off with the Champions League because it's fresh on my mind. The match has just happened last night, and of course, it's a huge story with Real Madrid being knocked out by Ajax, but I'm going to talk about that a little bit later on, because real quick, I want to go ahead and get Tottenham versus Borussia Dortmund out of the way. Now, as soon as these two teams were drawn together, what was it, in December, something like that? They got drawn together, and I pretty much immediately realized, okay, listen, this is going to be an easy tie for Tottenham. Now, Borussia Dortmund are a pretty good team. They're obviously top of the league in the Bundesliga, which is no small feat, considering Bayern Munich are kind of like a Juventus type of thing, where they're just constantly dominating. And, of course, for Borussia Dortmund to be at the top with a young team with really not a lot of great players in their team, it's definitely a really big thing for them to do. But there's a difference between doing that in the Bundesliga, where, with all due respect to a lot of the teams, apart from, say, Dortmund, Bayern, I guess Leipzig a little bit, but there's not really that many great teams in the Bundesliga. Of course, Schalke are always a pretty decent team, but there's really nobody that great. Bayern Munich just constantly dominates, and they always buy the best players from the various teams. I think it's like the only player that has kind of stayed loyal to the team that he was, brought up with, or at least that made him great, is Marco Reus. So, of course, is stuck with Borussia Dortmund. And, of course, Mario Götze is still there, but, of course, he went to Bayern in the meantime and then came back. So, really, Reus is the only one that's really remained loyal to a major team when it comes to Bundesliga. But as I was saying, when this tie was drawn, I kind of figured, like, Tottenham are just going to have too much, because if you look at the two teams next to each other, in goal, of course, Lloris is by far the better keeper. You look at the defenders, Dortmund don't really have that many great guys, like Toprak. There's just really nobody in that defense that you can look to really be a leader. Whereas, of course, with Tottenham, you have, three really solid center backs, and Vertonghen, who is not just a great center back, but he's also a very good player at being, used throughout defense. So he can play as left back as well. He can also play as a left mid. So he's a very, very good utility player, as well as being a very, very, very good center back. So you can be used kind of anywhere. Of course, there's Toby Alderweireld. There's a great player, a phenomenal center back. Maybe not quite as good as Vertonghen, but definitely as a pure center back, arguably better. The only difference is, of course, Vertonghen can be used just about anywhere. And, of course, they have the young Davinson Sanchez, who everybody expects to be a very, very good center back in the coming years. And then, of course, you look at the fullbacks. Tottenham have Serge Aurier, who's really going to become a great player. Not a great player, but he's become a very, very solid right back. Left back, of course, they have, between Rose and Trippier, they have a pretty solid group. So just overall, the defense, I would definitely say that Tottenham is much better. You look at midfield, and of course, Dortmund, they have Mario Götze, they have Witsel, so they have some good players there. But then you look at Tottenham's midfield, and you figure, when he's fit, Moussa Dembele is very, very good. You have Christian Eriksen, who's phenomenal. Of course, he plays a bit more forward, but he's still kind of technically a midfielder playing that cam role. And then you have Dele Alli, who when he's in form is a really, really good player. You have Eric Dyer, is a pretty good player. You have Moussa Sissoko, who, like, realistically, man, that guy gets a lot of crap. And I'm one of those guys who kind of talk shit about him pretty often, because you can tell that he has the physical gifts to really be one of the most dominant players in the team. But for some reason, there's something about his mentality and just kind of his skill set in general that kind of holds him back a little bit. It's like sometimes he just kind of shuts off and he isn't really in the match. It's kind of give you like a comparison. I kind of compare him to Nani. Of course, Nani had a lot more personality, had a lot more, I would say, technical gifts. Like, he was a lot more talented. And there were some matches where Nani was absolutely undefendable. Like, he was just absolutely unmarkable. Kind of like, in some ways, kind of like Ronaldo. He gets compared to Ronaldo quite a bit. They used to when they were both, relatively young. And that's just kind of the player that Nani was. But there were certain matches, like one every 2 or 3 matches, where Nani was basically, it was better to have him as an opponent than he was to have him on your team. So I kind of think that Moussa Sissoko is that kind of player. There's certain matches where he's an absolute he's a hellhound. You just cannot stop him. You know what I mean? Even the Ames team could not stop him. So shout out to anybody who gets that reference. Probably not many, but it is what it is. So he's just pretty much unstoppable on certain days. But for the most part, he just makes a lot of mistakes and does some stupid stuff. So he's a really good player on his day. but he's just not phenomenal. But he's still a player that deserves to be respected when it comes to playing in midfield. So he's definitely a good player there. And of course, you have Lucas Moura on the bench, who's a pretty solid player. So just overall, you look at the entire team of Tottenham in midfield, and it's pretty much better than anybody that's going to be playing on Borussia Dortmund. The one player that Dortmund has that could technically be, arguably one of the top 3 or 4 best players if he played for Tottenham is, of course, Marco Reus. Marco Reus is a player that we've known for a long time now, it's like 5 or 6 years now, that he is one of the elite players in world football. But unfortunately for him, he's always marred by injuries. It seems like every season he misses 2 to 3 months due to a pretty major injury as well, and then he's just never really been able to truly shine as much as he probably could have. Like, if you see when he was a younger player, like how just incredibly dynamic he was, how just devastating he could be in offense, whether it was scoring goals or setting up assists. He was looking like one of those guys who could really go on to be a truly great player. And of course, he's achieved quite a bit. He of course took Borussia Dortmund alongside Mario Götze and Robert Lewandowski and Matt Hummels as well to a Champions League final, which they ultimately lost to Bayern Munich. I think it was 2-1. But they eventually lost that one. And, maybe they gone to penalties. I can't quite remember. I think it was 2-1, but they may have gone to penalties. Anyway, so, of course, he's done some really good things in his career. But unfortunately, man, it never really clicks for him. And this was just another one of those times where he plays in a team, Borussia Dortmund, that's underpowered. Like, realistically, it's underpowered. And they might go on to win the Bundesliga, but I do think that Bayern Munich will probably turn it around and win the league. But as of right now, they are top of the league in the Bundesliga. So he is doing some really good things there. But when it comes to the Champions League, you can't you have to have a really, really solid team throughout your entire lineup. Like, it's not going to be enough to have him, Mario Götze, and I guess the next best player on that team is maybe Witsel. I mean, that's just not really enough. It's not even close to being enough. And of course, you can kind of mention Pulisic, but Pulisic is another good. He's a very, very young, talented player, one of the best, arguably the best American of all time, based on what his potential is, of course. He isn't quite there yet, but I think that he could easily be the best American of all time if he can kind of continue with this progression. And I'm kind of worried about him going to Chelsea because Chelsea have a tendency of not really utilizing their young players. But if they give him the opportunity to really shine and grow into, being a great player in the Premier League, then he definitely has the potential of being an elite player, even in the top league in the world. But we'll see what happens there. But realistically, Pulisic is a good player, but he's not really one that you can rely on to really carry you in the Champions League. And at the end of the day, Tottenham were the better team throughout the entire lineups, and they put it on them. In the first match, it was a 3-0 win, really easy basically. Just Tottenham were just more devastating, they were more cynical. Then in the second leg last night, Borussia started the match in the right way. The fans, of course, at the ex-Westfalen Stadium, I think it's called, what's it called now? The Borussia Park, I think it is, are always going to be great. The BVB wall, it's notorious for being one of the most intimidating ends in all of world football, and they're just a very, very, very good fan base. So, much respect to the fans, and to credit to the players, they went out there and they tried to get the win. They tried their ass off. Hugo Lloris was in amazing form last night, made some huge saves, and it was just enough for Tottenham to kind of isolate possession, slow the game down towards the middle of the first half. Kind of absorb some of the pressure that they were being put through, and then at the very beginning of the second half, Harry Kane off of a really good assist, but it was also just very, very poor defending. Like, Harry Kane was just wide open, a nice through pass, and all of a sudden, Harry Kane, he does not miss those kind of chances. It makes it 1-0, and from then on, it was pretty much just dead. Borussia already had an almost impossible climb to make, and then that goal by Harry Kane just pretty much shut him out, because they had to score 5 goals, basically, to be able to even have a chance of moving forward. So, it just wasn't going to happen. It just was not going to happen. So, at the end of the day, Borussia Dortmund are a pretty decent team. Of course, doing what they're doing in the Bundesliga, like I said, it's impressive, but they have a long way to go before they're going to be even somewhat capable of making really big headlines and really making a lot of noise in the Champions League. It was still, a pretty good feat for them to get to where they got to, get past the group stage and all that, but realistically, they're still a long way away from being on the same level as a team like Tottenham. And now we're going to talk about the big story. All right, coming into this tie, as soon as Real Madrid drew Ajax, it was like, okay, classic Real Madrid, they got a pretty easy matchup, a young team, inexperienced team, Real Madrid having Ballon d'Or winner Luka Modric, having great players throughout the entire lineup. There isn't a single player in the Real Madrid lineup that you couldn't argue is better than every single player on that Ajax lineup. Okay, Real Madrid, of course, we all know, have one of the best, just man for man, individually speaking, have one of the best lineups in the history of the game. Okay, they lost Cristiano Ronaldo, but you would still expect this Real Madrid team to still be able to get to at least the semifinals. All right, and of course the first leg, the entire match, Ajax was dominating. Like, make no mistake about it, Ajax could have gone on to win that game 3-4 or 4-1 realistically. Unfortunately for them, they were only able to score one, and Real Madrid got two pretty scrappy goals, but they were still cynical enough to really get those goals when it counted. Now, that was in Amsterdam, so everybody figured, okay, it's over. It's over. Or at least not over, but there was a good chance that Real Madrid were going to go to the Santiago Bernabeu, and they were just going to ice the match. They're just going to close it out really early on with a goal or two. Now, the match started, and it was looking like that might happen. Real Madrid had a few pretty solid chances. I think they hit the bar with Marco Asensio within like the first 5 to 10 minutes, so they were creating the chances. And then all of a sudden, on the break, Real Madrid's defense was really, really, really exposed. Like, this is the match that really showed that without Sergio Ramos and without Marcelo, this Real Madrid defense is piss poor. All right, I don't know what the hell Solari is doing by not starting Marcelo, but it's just ridiculous. Like, listen, what's his name? Reguilon, the young left back that Real Madrid have been playing. He was born in 1996, which is actually 2 years younger than me. So he's 22, going towards 23. And of course, he has great potential. I'm sure he has great potential. He's a young player playing at Real Madrid. He's a starter somehow over Marcelo. So the guy has a lot of talent, and that Solari considers him to be a very, very promising player for the future. But Marcelo is fucking Marcelo. I don't care who the hell you have in your team. If you have Marcelo, he's pretty much he's going to be the best player in that position, like, guaranteed. There's only one person in the world that I would say is possibly on that level as of right now, and that has to be Alexandro from Juventus. But even him, he's just nowhere near Marcelo, because of course Marcelo is a very, very dominant player going forward. He's almost more a winger than he's a left back, but he doesn't get enough respect for his physical attributes because he's a very strong guy. He tracks back a lot, even though in FIFA he has a low-high rating. He has a high-low, which means he attacks more than he defends. But that's just FIFA. That's just a dumbass video game. And it's broken, by the way, so I'll cover that some other time. But of course, Marcelo, he has to get the respect that he deserves on defense, because it is not easy to break Real Madrid down the left side when he's there. It doesn't matter who's on that side alongside him. He's going to be creating a lot of chances, going to be getting back every single time, and he's just a very, very good player. And of course, he's a little bit older now. I think he's like 30, maybe a little bit older than that too. But regardless, it's still Marcelo. So how the hell is he not starting in a game when they're already missing Sergio Ramos, who is their leader? Basically, he is, since Ronaldo has left now, that he is 100% their number one leader. All right, it's maybe him, and then I guess you could say Luka Modric maybe, but it is 100% Sergio Ramos. With Sergio Ramos off, out with for being suspended for the match, who do you look to? Marcelo and Luka Modric. Those are the two guys, and yet Marcelo somehow is on the bench. And of course, everybody knows that Real Madrid have been on a pretty bad run of matches for over the past month or two. So you would expect them to try to go back to the players that really got them to the Champions League final. And like I said, of course, you're missing Ronaldo, so you're missing the best player in the world, possibly the best player of all time. I personally think he is, but you're missing that player, so obviously it's going to be a lot more difficult. But fuck, man, in attack you still have Gareth Bale, you still have Karim Benzema, you have Isco, you have Luka Modric moving forward, you have Toni Kroos as one of the best playmakers in the world, if not the best, alongside Luka Modric. You have these amazing players. How is it possible that you're not scoring goals? All right, that's just the one thing. That's a different thing. But at the very least, put in Marcelo to guarantee that you're not going to be conceding that many goals. Look, Nacho Fernandez, I'm sure he's not a bad player, but he got exposed brutally in this match. All right, and I think that if he had Marcelo alongside of him, then that probably would have happened. Maybe they may have still lost. All right, I'm not going to say that they wouldn't have lost. They probably would have still lost. But what they've conceded 4 goals and almost conceded 5, maybe even almost conceding 6. Probably not, because Marcelo wouldn't have allowed those plays to go build up from the right side, which would be, of course, Marcelo's left side. So I just don't think that would happen, because if you look at it, a lot of those goals came from the right side. Tadic was bombing through there, getting in awesome crosses for Van Beek, and of course for Ziyech. So it's just, I think that if Marcelo had been there, it would have been a different story for Real Madrid, and I think they would have been a lot more solid defensively. But it is what it is. I guess at this point, Solari is probably about to be sacked as well. They're out of the Copa del Rey after getting mollywashed by Barcelona. I think the first match finished like 1-1 or 1-0, something like that. I'm having a blank right now, but definitely Barcelona smashed them 3-0 in the second leg and just knocked them out in an emphatic fashion. Of course, Real Madrid have not been clicking. They even lost to Girona recently. So overall, Real Madrid have not been a good team for a while now. And I think we're going to see, after Lopetegui got sacked, I think Solari's about to get sacked too. I think the only thing that's kind of holding him there is the fact that he is still a legend of the club, and that maybe since they're out of the Champions League at this point and the Copa del Rey, and realistically they're out of the La Liga running too, they're just going to hold him until the end of the season so they can kind of scout the right manager, bring him in, and kind of fix things. And this just kind of goes to show you, like, I think we all say Zidane, he left in weird circumstances, right? Like, why did he leave exactly? But I think that now we're really starting to see why. I think that once Ronaldo left, he probably realized that there was some turmoil inside the locker room. There were some issues there. A lot of the players are a bit older now. I think Sergio Ramos is definitely in his 30s. Marcelo's in his 30s. Benzema is getting up there in age, and he's taking some beatings because he's also a guy that's had a lot of injuries. Marcelo, like I said, is a bit older. He has quite a few older players, and I think he might kind of made the right choice of leaving when he did, because things have not been going well. You never know with Zidane. Things may have gone better. They may have remained a very, very good team, one of the best teams in Europe. But as of right now, they're looking like a shadow of the team that we saw dominate the Champions League for 3 years in a row. So it's very interesting to see. But we'll see what happens with Zidane, and we'll see what happens now with Real Madrid. But the bottom line is, from the opening minute, or not really the opening minute, but let's say from the 10th minute on, or whenever Ajax scored the first goal of the second leg, Real Madrid never really looked like they were going to be able to get back in the match. And of course, they hit the post once again. I can't remember who hit the post, but they did hit the second post. So they could argue that maybe they got a bit unlucky and stuff like that. And Bale didn't really show up, and none of the players really shot up. Like, none of them really showed up. I think there was one. I very clearly remember one chance where Benzema had the ball on his left foot. He could have shot on the first or second touch and had a pretty clear chance, but he decided to kind of scoop it in onto his right foot and try to score, but then he kind of got himself stuck because there was a defender right on his ass, so he had to move it back to his left foot, and then by then it was over for him. So they arguably could have won the tie, or at least won the match. But at the end of the day, man, Ajax on the counterattack, they just dominated them, and defensively with Daley Blind, De Ligt, they just looked very, very solid, and it's very, very impressive because as the casters were talking about last night, as the announcers during the match, I was of course watching in Italian because I live in Italy. They were mentioning, like, this team, pretty much all their players are under 22, under 23s. Imagine how good this team will be in 3 or 4 years if they're able to keep these players together and maybe bring in 1 or 2 players that are of big enough stature to kind of carry them even further. Like, they might not make it past the quarterfinals depending on who they get, but at the very least, man, to put on that type of performance, beating Real Madrid at the Bernabeu 4-1, it's just incredible. It's just incredible. So hats off to Ajax, and it's actually really nice to see because Ajax, of course, are a very historic club, having players like Johan Cruyff, having Van der Sar, Overmars, just some of the greatest players to ever come out of Holland, and really a lot of the best players to ever live. Like, I think you just look at these players, and a lot of them are legends. A lot of them are just iconic figures in the sport. So Ajax is a great club, and unfortunately for them, there isn't a lot of money in Dutch football. So they kind of have to rely on these young, talented players that come up through the youth ranks, and for them to have this many great young players alongside some really good players like Tadic. Like, you see Tadic when he played for Southampton, and you figure, that's a good player. That's a really good player, but who the fuck knew he could do that to Real Madrid? Absolutely nobody. So for him to do that, man, that's probably the single best moment in an already pretty good career. He was in the Premier League for a long time, and then he went to Ajax, which, of course, it could technically be seen like a step down going from the Premier League to the Dutch League, but of course he went to the number 1 club in Holland, and he was able to show what he can really do against the top team like Real Madrid, and he dominated them. Van Beek, phenomenal performance. Just overall, the entire team was just phenomenal, just 100% phenomenal. Of course, Ziyech, he even could have had his second goal. He missed a pretty wide open shot. It was a pretty easy shot, but he managed to miss it. But it is what it is. At the end of the day, Ajax knocked out Real Madrid in emphatic fashion. It just goes to show you. Man. Like, anybody can be beaten on any day whatsoever. And without Cristiano Ronaldo, Real Madrid are looking a lot more human than they've really ever looked over the past arguably 5 to 6 years. Like, you figure whenever they won their first Champions League back in, what was it, 2014 or 15, that was kind of the beginning of their dynasty, of them being back in Europe. So we'll see what happens. It's still Real Madrid, so I'm expecting them next season to kind of regroup and have a different manager, have bring in some really solid young players. Not really young, but top players. I wouldn't be surprised to see like Eden Hazard go over there. Unfortunately, maybe like Paul Pogba. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see some of these players go over there and with a better manager or somebody who can at least take hold of the situation, really get themselves back to the top of Europe. But regardless, man, Ajax, top of the notch performance, just incredible from those young guys. So I'm really, really happy to see that. It just goes to show you, man, that youth in football is not dead. Like, there was a time in football where you saw the class of '92 at Man United, you saw countless Ajax squads, and youth was always a huge thing. Like, if you could have that, then you were almost guaranteed to always have a few, at the very least, a few great players in your lineup that can just come into your lineup, really build you up, carry you somewhere, and then if you want to sell them, you sell them, but you can also keep them for a long time and really go to just extreme heights. And it's good to see that isn't dead in football. Ajax are kind of the emblem of that, have always been the emblem of that, and it's just great to see that they're still there. Sorry about that, guys. I need a sip of water. Let's go ahead and talk about UFC 235. 235 was a card that, personally, in the build-up, I was extremely excited for. Like, very, very, very excited for, especially for the main card. But even in the prelims, Diego Sanchez taking on Mickey Gall, that was a legend of the sport, taking on an up-and-comer that everybody kind of expects to be really good. We saw what he did against CM Punk, which is absolutely nothing to be bragging about. Then we saw, before that, we saw what he did Michael Jackson, and then, which is also nothing to brag about. But then we saw him beat Sage Northcutt, who is another guy that, is a pretty solid young prospect. And of course, now he left the UFC because, let's just be real, he wasn't quite achieving what the UFC was hoping he would, and I think it was just too much too soon for Sage Northcutt, and it was kind of too much too soon for Mickey Gall, because at the end of the day, man, if you get dominated by Diego Sanchez, who, with all due respect, is far past his prime, and fighting at welterweight, he is much smaller than almost everybody's going to be fighting against at that weight class, because he was never even a big lightweight. He was always a relatively small, or at least average-sized lightweight. He even went down to 145 and lost to Ricardo Lamas. So let's just be real. Like, Diego Sanchez is, by no stretch of the imagination, a phenomenal fighter right now. He's a good fighter because he still has that grit, he has that heart, but his chin is no longer there. He doesn't really have a power, which is just surprisingly, like, if you think of Diego Sanchez as just this animal in the cage, but then you look at his record, and he hadn't finished somebody since 2008. Since 2008, before beating Mickey Gall by TKO. It's just honestly, it's really, really, really embarrassing for Mickey Gall. And I'm a Mickey Gall fan. He's been on Punch Drunk Sports a lot of times. I mentioned this in the last episode as well. Check that out, by the way, if you haven't checked it out and you're interested. I'm a fan of him because, of course, he was on Punch Drunk. So that's a podcast that I have been listening to for 7 years now, probably. I would say 7 years, 8 years. 6 years at the minimum. And I also used to write for the website, so I have ties with them. And the fact that Mickey Gall calls in quite a bit, he's been in the studio quite a bit, and he was a fan of this podcast before he became a UFC star, or at least not really a star, but a hot prospect in MMA. He was already a fan, so I always root for Mickey Gall pretty much. And I don't know, I was honestly expecting a lot more. And the way the fight started, you could tell that Mickey Gall, he was a lot bigger, and he had definitely improved on his striking, at least offensively, working with Joe Schilling, and of course with Eve Edwards. But unfortunately for him, man, it just was not even close to being enough. Like, he gassed out pretty early. Diego Sanchez, once he got on top of him, we kind of saw that Mickey Gall, he's good on top, but on the bottom, there's really not much there. And Diego Sanchez, like, if anything, he is still a good grappler. Like, he might not be good on the feet anymore. He's pretty slow. He's very flat-footed. He's sloppy. His chin is pretty much trash now because he's taken a lot of beatings, to be real, over his career. And his IQ on the feet is just not that high, because you would think that after somebody gets beat up that many times and he takes that many beatings, and you would kind of think that he would realize, okay, listen, I need to change some things. I need to fight smarter. I need to be more intelligent and make better decisions, but he just doesn't seem to ever do that. He always just kind of seems to make the wrong choice at the wrong time and get himself knocked out, or do something stupid and end up losing a decision. And for him to dominate Mickey Gall in the way that he did after like the first minute or two, it was just, I think that was kind of eye-opening to what level Mickey Gall is really at. And it's just, it is what it is, man. Like, Mickey Gall is still very young. I think that he still has a lot of potential. Like, his jiu-jitsu is still very, very solid when he's on top, but he needs to work on his guard. And of course, I don't do any jiu-jitsu, so my opinion isn't that valid, but I watch a lot of MMA. I've been watching this for, what is it, like 8 years now, 9 years, so I don't really miss a lot of events, and if I do, I watch them the day after. So at the end of the day, I think that I have enough knowledge of the sport to know what I'm talking about. I think that Mickey Gall needs to work on his ground game for sure on the bottom. At the very least, work on his wrestling, because he got taken down pretty easily by a guy like Diego Sanchez, who, like I said, is at the very end of his career, and he's not very explosive anymore. So to have that happen, it's just not good. It's not good for him. So he needs to work on that type of stuff. And if it is true that his weight cut went that poor, that he passed out, and that he just had zero energy, then maybe that could be, the reason. But at the end of the day, man, like, it's an excuse, yeah, and it might be a valid excuse, but it's still an excuse. So you need to fix that. And I think that he's still young enough to where he can, but Diego Sanchez really put a beating on him, and I kind of would like to see Diego Sanchez retire right there. Like beating a young lion in that fashion, his first finish since 2008. I would really like to see Diego Sanchez hang up the gloves right there, but it looks like he's going to keep on going, and I don't know, man. It's just like, I don't really see Diego Sanchez's career going any better than it did right there. I just don't see it happening, but I'm rooting for him, man. He's a pioneer of the sport, a legend. He's hilarious the way he's just a fucking nutcase, man. He's just a savage, and everything he does is just crazy. So I'm rooting for him, but at the end of the day, I just don't think he has a whole lot left in his career. Of course, the other fight that I was really interested in seeing on the prelims was, of course, Jeremy Stephens taking on Zabit Magomedsharipov, and that was kind of a fight that I kind of expected. Jeremy Stephens, he plods forward, and he throws, when he's at his best, he throws some combos, but for the most part, he likes to throw one, maybe two hit combos, just trying to look for as much power as possible. He just kind of plods forward. Not great footwork, not bad either, but nothing really special. There was no lateral movement from him, which Dominic Cruz, who is, of course, his teammate, his sparring partner, he was also on the broadcast team, so he was mentioning that quite a bit. The thing that Jeremy Stephens is messing up there is that he's plodding forward too much. He's not using movement, and he's not forcing Zabit to get into awkward situations. Like, usually, the very best fighters, when they are stalking their prey, they cut off the cage. They make sure that they get themselves, that their opponent gets into a situation where they either move forward and strike, or they move backwards and they're still in striking range because the cage is right there. Unfortunately for Jeremy Stephens, he didn't really do that. He was just chasing Zabit instead of closing down the octagon. And Zabit kind of, exploited that quite a bit, landed some nice shots. It wasn't the best performance by Zabit, but it was definitely one of those performances that showed this man can definitely compete with the top 5 in the featherweight division. And I don't know who they're going to give him next, but somebody tough, somebody at the very top. It's going to be interesting. Like, I think you can make the argument, if Max Holloway loses to Dustin Poirier and drops back down to 145 and wants to defend the title there, then yes, maybe Zabit could fight Max Holloway. But as of right now, I'm kind of leaning towards Frankie Edgar taking on Zabit, of course, because I think that'd be a really good test to see what Zabit can do against an elite wrestler. Like a truly elite wrestler who can also mix in some really, really good boxing and really see what he can do against that level of opponent. If he can beat Frankie Edgar, then 100% give him a title shot. If not, then maybe give him Brian Ortega. See what happens there, because there's plenty to look forward to there. And I've been seeing a lot of people saying, we want Kron Gracie versus Brian Ortega, but I think that's just way too much, way too soon for Kron Gracie. I would much rather see somebody like Zabit take him on, because, of course, Zabit, he has just this crazy striking skill set, and it'd be really, really interesting to see. It's just really interesting to see. So hopefully that will take place eventually, and we'll see what happens with Zabit. I think he's definitely a very, very top prospect, but his biggest issue is his cardio. As me and my friends, Gianluca, my brother is Gianluca, and my friend Marco, we were watching all together, like as we do every week, and we were just mentioning, like, his biggest issue is that he gets gassed out early in the third round, if not late in the second round. So once he does it against somebody like Frankie Edgar, he's fucked. If he does it against a guy like Max Holloway, he's completely fucked. If he does it against maybe a guy like Brian Ortega even, he's completely fucked. So we'll see what happens, man. I think he has a lot of potential, but he needs to work on his cardio for sure, especially because these are 3-rounders, and what's going to happen if he has to go to the championship rounds? It's not going to be good for him. So we'll see what happens there. But I definitely like Zabit, and I definitely Look forward to seeing what happens to him in the future. And then, of course, we move on to the main card where Cody Garbrandt hilariously got knocked out by Pedro Munoz. And in some of my videos before, like predicting some of these fights, back when I was doing regular YouTube videos, if you've seen him before, then you know I'm not a big Cody Garbrandt fan. I think this is just gonna sound the way it is. You know, I think he's retarded. Like, his fighting style is retarded. He makes retarded decisions, and he just does as much stupid shit as is humanly possible. All right, his last 3 fights, or at least his last 2 fights, have been knocked out by TJ Dillashaw and knocked out by TJ Dillashaw. So you figure, okay, listen, the champ has your number, no big deal, right? The champion, TJ, he's a phenomenal fighter, one of the best pound for pound in the world. Of course, lost to Henry Cejudo, but I think if they do that fight 9 out of 10 times, TJ beats him, especially if they do it at bantamweight. But regardless, I think that TJ is just a phenomenal fighter. You know, his striking is phenomenal, his wrestling is great. I think that he's better than Cody Garbrandt in every single aspect of mixed martial arts. So there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that at all. Pedro Munoz, yes, he's heavy-handed. Yes, he's got a pretty good chin. And yes, his jiu-jitsu is phenomenal. But if Cody Garbrandt keeps on the feet, then you would expect him to be faster, more powerful, and have the crisper boxing, the better technique. And he kind of did. You know, he cracked Pedro Munoz pretty early and was doing some damage. But then he got overly aggressive, as he always does. Got rocked by Pedro Munoz, and that just enhanced the aggression. At that point, he was just doing the same thing he did against TJ Dillashaw in both fights. He was just throwing these looping hooks constantly, just these garbage, predictable looping hooks. And of course, Pedro Munoz, not being stupid, he understood what was happening, probably seeing the tape of the TJ Dillashaw fights, and really kind of realizing, okay, all I have to do is put one on the button and he's done. He's going to wail on me. He's going to wail on me, and if I can eat 1 or 2 of these, survive and land one of mine, it's over. Because at this point, you have to say, you know, Cody Garbrandt's chin it's kind of fucked. Like, it's just not there anymore. I think Cody ruined him. I mean, TJ ruined him. Like, from a chin point of view, he was never that solid because he got knocked out early on in his career as well. But that happens when you're young, you know? That happens when you're an up-and-comer, when you're starting to gain experience. But TJ knocked him out twice in the span of less than a year. So that is not good for your brain. And for him to go out there and fight the same way against Pedro Munoz as he did against TJ Dillashaw, it shows 2 things. Number 1, shit coaching. Like, I don't know what's going on at Team Alpha Male, but even Justin Buckles, who might be a little bit butthurt, but he was saying, like, the biggest issue there is the coaching. Like, when he was there, Cody Garbrandt was doing exactly what Justin Buckles was saying. It was all about, you know, getting in, getting out, not getting himself into danger, landing the big shot, but not getting hit. That was the whole thing of Justin Buckles. His whole system was about that. It was kind of like Bang Muay Thai, but a little bit different. Like, that's kind of where he learned. You know, he learned from Dwayne Ludwig. That's where he got his striking. You know, that's who his coach was, and he was, of course, an assistant coach. So once Dwayne left, Justin Buckles became the head coach. After Martin Kampman left. So Justin Buckles, of course, doing that. And then he mentioned he knows more or less what's going on in training now, and it's not the right type of training. It's just not the right type, and they're letting Cody Garbrandt take way too much damage. And I agree with him 100%. You know, they're not doing the right things for him, and if they are giving him these explanations, then, at least these instructions, then they're doing him a very big disservice. Now, you can hear his corner telling him to fight smarter and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, man, the fighter does what the fighter does, and he got clipped, and he got knocked the fuck out. So that's 3 times in about a year and a half at the very longest. So he needs to take. I think he needs to take about a solid year off. He needs to take a year off to completely regroup. Hopefully for him, his chin will kind of get back to full strength. Maybe just relax, and hopefully for him, you know, just come back stronger than ever. But at this point, I think he might be the next Renan Barão. Like, you see what happened to Barão after he lost to TJ, especially the second time. Like, okay, let's just put it this way: Barão got absolutely destroyed in the first fight. Okay, then Barão came back and he almost lost to Mitch Gagnon. Who's just not a good fighter. He's just not that great. You know, he's a basic fighter, who's just nothing special. He comes into fighting TJ once again, and he gets battered. Arguably worse than the first fight. Arguably worse than that one. Just destroyed. And then from then on, he's won like 1 fight. I think he maybe beat Horcher or something like that at featherweight. Featherweight or something. No, he lost, I think, both times at featherweight. Then he lost to Horcher, I think, which may have been featherweight. But regardless, he has like 1 win in his last 5 or 6 fights. So, or maybe 2 wins in his last 5 or 6. But regardless, he has been an absolute shadow of arguably the pound-for-pound great that we saw back when he was dominating. He won like 31 in a row or 32 in a row or something like that. So to see that brow turn into this brow, it honestly, it's just shocking. So we'll see what happens with Cody, man. If Cody takes a little bit of time off and can get back to where he's mentally strong, and maybe even going to a different camp, going somewhere where he can train with a different coach, maybe go to somebody like Henry Hoof, who of course doesn't have the best resume in terms of title fights, but he's definitely got a good camp down there in Florida. Just get to somewhere different, get some different coaching, and improve on your game in various ways, and hopefully for him, he will come back. But at this point in time, I just don't think that there's really much you can fix there, because I think that's kind of a mental issue that he has, which is as soon as he gets clipped, his anger issues just kind of come out, and he goes after you. Like, you can even see in The Ultimate Fighter when he was coaching opposite of TJ, you know, he has this like 15, 16-year-old kid vibe, to where if he even slightly feels like he's been outsmarted or, you know, just outdone in anything, he just becomes this butthurt baby, and he just goes swinging at you, whether it's with trash talk, which is also awful trash talk, or he swings at you with just random looping hooks and he gets knocked the fuck out. So, and of course he would beat my ass. I want that to be very, very clear. I'm not saying he's a bad fighter. I'm not even questioning his skill or anything. I'm just saying I think there's kind of a mental weakness there, or at least a lack of fight IQ, to where I don't know if that's even fixable. Like, at this point, I think it's just kind of who he is, and he might still have a great career, but will he ever be a champion? Will he ever be a champion again, I guess you could say? I don't think so. At least not as long as TJ Dillashaw is there, and as long as he does stupid stuff like that. I just don't think it's going to happen. Moving forward to the card, of course, Tecia Torres getting beaten by, I can't remember the lady's name, but great performance there by the Chinese lady, really showing that female Chinese MMA and Asian MMA in general, I guess you could say, through a whole, with Doo Ho Choi, you know, Korean Zombie being really, really solid. There's some really solid Asian MMA fighters, and, you know, she might be a future contender in that weight class. You never know. She looked very good. She isolated and made Tecia Torres look, you know, really poor, which is something that Tecia Torres usually does to everybody else. Like, I wouldn't say that Torres is a very good fighter, but I would say that she's a frustrating fighter to fight against, because even good fighters look awful against her. So, and they might still beat her, but they just don't ever look really good. So, I would say definitely much respect to her for beating Tecia Torres, even though for some reason I can't remember her name, which is not the best when you're doing a podcast, but it's kind of my modus operandi. It's just kind of how I am. My memory's shit, so it is what it is. Moving forward, of course, in the feature bouts, we had Robbie Lawler versus Ben Askren, which was arguably the fight that I was most looking forward to on this event. And unfortunately ended in controversy, but I'll go ahead and talk about it a little bit. And of course, I'm kind of a Ben Askren skeptic. I've never really hidden this. I don't like him as from a personality point of view. I don't think he's entertaining when it comes to his trash talk. I don't even think that he's particularly hateable. Like, I don't dislike him, and I don't like him, which is never something that you want from a guy. And I don't like his style. I will say that I don't like his boring ass style, which is, of course, I'm a hater, whatever you want to say about me. I don't really give a shit if you don't like my opinion. That's just kind of the way it is. You know, his grind him out style, where he's just kind of trash on the feet and all that stuff. I like people that are well-rounded, and even if you're predominantly wrestling, just be able to hold your own on the feet and, you know, do something on the feet. And he's been fighting, you know, bums out in ONE FC the whole time, or beating younger guys like Koreshkov and Lima in Bellator, which of course was before Douglas Lima was any good, really. And of course Koreshkov just isn't really that good in general, so no impressive wins there. Then of course he went to ONE FC and beat a bunch of bums for a while. Same thing with World Series of Fighting. So really he doesn't have any impressive wins, in my opinion, throughout his career. And then he goes against Robbie Lawler, who of course is a very, very solid sprawling brawler. He doesn't really care about going to the ground. Like, he doesn't want to take you down, so he just wants to keep you on the feet and literally just sprawl and brawl the shit out of you. So, and he did that. Arguably, I think that if there was any time for the fight to be stopped, it wasn't during that bulldog choke, because realistically, in 2019, who the fuck gets finished by a bulldog choke? Definitely not Robbie fucking Lawler. If anything, it was Ben Askren who was getting an absolute ass whooping by the Ruthless One early in that first round. So, I don't know, man. Like, if you look at it, to me, for a second there, it looked like his arm goes limp. But I agree with him. I don't think it was out. I think he just put his arm there. It was actually kind of smart. Like, of course, it backfired on him, but if you think about it, it's kind of smart, because it makes your opponent think that you're out. If your opponent thinks you're out, then there might be a split second in which they kind of let go a little bit, and that gives you opportunity to slide out. Of course, Ben Askren being an experienced wrestler, being, of course, an experienced MMA fighter as well, even though he hasn't really beaten anybody relevant except for a very controversial win over Robbie Lawler. He still has that experience. He's still been competing for that long, and he is an elite wrestler, so he knows what he's doing. And of course, he didn't let it go, so he didn't fall for it. But of course, Herb Dean, he's asking him if he's okay, and you can tell Robbie isn't necessarily in the right position to be able to tell him vocally that he's not, that he's perfectly fine. So Herb Dean goes in, he touches Robbie to see if his arm's okay, and then Robbie gives him the thumbs up. So it does not matter if his arm goes limp. He's giving you the thumbs up, which means he is not unconscious. Find me an unconscious person who gives you the thumb up if you check on him. It's just not going to happen. This isn't the WWE where they're faking it. This is just not the way it is. So Robbie Lawler was not out. I don't care what you say. Robbie Lawler was not out. And that's just my opinion. Of course, I guess I do kind of care what you say. I am up for debate about that. But in my personal opinion, Robbie Lawler did not deserve to lose that fight. I think that he was dominating him. He absolutely showed that on the feet, Ben Askren has nothing to offer, like absolutely nothing to offer. That takedown attempt that he threw early on was very Khabib-esque in the sense that if he doesn't get the first takedown, he's going to keep on trying, he's going to keep working on you until he eventually does. But Robbie is such an explosive monster who has some pretty good wrestling in his own right. Just threw him up, and honestly, he did the John Cena attitude adjustment, or FU, whatever the hell it's called, and it was just honestly hilarious. Like, my brother was passed out sleeping on the couch because of how boring it was, that female fight was, and then, of course, not being too interested in seeing Ben Askren because nobody really cares about Ben Askren, in my opinion. He woke up to us screaming, just loving the fact that the wrestler just got absolutely slammed in brutal fashion by Robbie Lawler. And between the slam and the ground and pound, I honestly thought that, listen, Ben Askren's done. All right, this fight's over. But Herb Dean decided not to stop it, which is kind of hilarious because Herb Dean is either early stoppage Herb or very late stoppage Herb. So it's interesting what kind of goes between in his mindset. Like, I don't understand. Like, I can understand not stopping that fight if it's in a title fight or it's a main event, but in that type of scenario, I think he probably should have stopped it. But of course, Ben Askren came back, and he came back in great fashion. He took down Robbie, and of course, he was able to take his back and get him to a bulldog choke. So, say what you want about Ben Askren, he does have a lot of heart. I'm not a fan of him, both from a stylistic point of view or from a personality point of view necessarily, but he has a lot of heart. And he went out there, and at the end of the day, he doesn't make decisions. He does what he does. He tries to do his job. And if the referee makes a mistake, that's on the referee. It's not on Ben Askren. So it is what it is. I mean, I would like to see them do the rematch because I think that if they do that fight 9 out of 10 times, Robbie Lawler beats the shit out of him 9 times. Okay. If they do the fight 10 times, Robbie Lawler knocks him out, I think 9 times. He's not counting this one right here. And I just think that's the way it is. So I'm hoping that the UFC does kind of force them to do the rematch because, of course, it was very controversial. But Ben Askren doesn't seem to be that guy. I don't think he wants to fight Robbie Lawler again. He's been pretty clear about that. And I don't think it's necessarily the I like Robbie Lawler thing. I just think he realizes that Robbie Lawler is an awful matchup for him, and he's kind of said that before. And I think that he himself knows that he got very fortunate in that fight. So he definitely doesn't want to do that fight again. He just does not want that. So one of the fights I was most excited for just because I wanted to see Robbie Lawler beat the shit out of Ben Askren, and it goes that way. So it is what it is. I guess you can call me a hater, like I said. Go for it. I really don't care. I'm just not a fan. Moving on to the co-main events, Kamaru Usman dismantling Tyron Woodley, and Woodley himself kind of talked about how there are these moments in his career, like against Rory McDonald, where for some reason he just does not throw. He does not throw those heavy hands, and it really cost him in this one because I think that the one place that Woodley was going to be dominant against Usman in was in the boxing because Usman he's more than capable on the feet. Let's not get it twisted. He's got heavy hands as well, so he's a big, strong welterweight, and his wrestling is impeccable. All right, his grappling is phenomenal. His cardio is phenomenal. His heart is phenomenal. His grit, his IQ is phenomenal. His ability to stick to the game plan is phenomenal. But when it comes to the striking, Tyron Woodley has those just propellers in his hand that just really send people flying. And yet, for some reason, he didn't really use it. I think he was in a defensive shell because he was way too worried about the takedown. I think maybe he got a little bit ahead of himself when it comes to what he was planning for his career, because even he himself mentioned, like, his plan was fight Kamaru Usman, fight Colby Covington, move up the middleweight, and win the title there, and then retire. So I just think that he was probably thinking too far ahead. Maybe got a little bit too cocky, maybe believed in himself a little bit too much. Of course, self-belief is huge, but at the same time, you got to really focus on the task at hand, and maybe he was focusing on other things. And of course, his rap album just came out like yesterday, the day before. So of course he was doing that as well. He's been acting quite a bit. So I'm not going to necessarily sit here and say that maybe he lost track of his priorities or maybe believed in himself too much. But I definitely think that factors into it. And then of course he came against Kamaru Usman, who just was not going to lose that night. He just was not going to lose. So Usman, perfect game plan. He did what Rory did and put him against the cage. Made sure that he had his back there, which is kind of where Tyron Woodley always likes to be anyway. But he didn't really put himself in the type of situations where Woodley can use his power. So he fought a very, very smart fight, grinded him out, hurt him, I would say. I mean, even though Woodley said he was never really hurt to the body, but you could tell, man, Usman landed like 20 or something like that, shot straight to the rib cage in a row with zero defending. And I think that's where Woodley kind of realized, like, this is not good. Like, that has to take something out of you. Like, Woodley's cardio has never been the best. He's also never been the worst with cardio, but it's never been the best. And when you take body shots like that, it just takes so much out of you. So I think Woodley was kind of understanding right there that he was kind of done. And then, of course, he even mentioned the post-fight press conference. There was a moment where he took a big elbow from Usman, and he kind of had flashbacks to the Nate Marquardt knockout, and he was like, okay, I cannot take more of those. So I think that pretty early on, Usman took him out of his element. Even in the first round, he just kind of held him on the ground and was pretty much doing whatever he wanted to with him. Got him tired, made him work, and put him in a situation where he's questioning what he's going to be able to do that fight. And Woodley, he knows in the back of his mind that there are these specific moments in his career, these specific fights where he doesn't throw. And I think that once that kind of comes to his head, like, is this one of those nights? Then it's just over. So Usman kind of broke him mentally very early on, just carried it out through the entire fight. Moving on to the main events. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and say, like Usman, it has been announced that he's going to be fighting Colby Covington. So that's going to be interesting. Similar styles. If anything, I'll say that Colby Covington likes to move forward, whereas, of course, Tyron Woodley likes to stay backwards and be against the fence and be a counter fighter, but that doesn't really work against a guy like Usman, who doesn't really throw a lot of strikes. So I think it was just a very, very bad matchup for Woodley. But we'll see what Usman can do against a guy like Colby Covington, who's going to kind of push the pace. He's going to try to be in his face. But I think that Colby, apart from his cardio, he doesn't really do anything specifically well. Like, his wrestling, of course, is pretty good. It's very good, but his striking isn't good. Is it better than Usman's? I don't think so. Is his wrestling better? Maybe. But I think that Usman is smarter, and I think that Usman's going to put, not necessarily put a beating on him, but I think he's going to definitely beat him by a pretty easy decision. But we'll see. We'll talk more about that once that is officially, like, scheduled for a specific event and as that gets closer, because you never know with the UFC at this point. Like, anything can happen. Maybe Colby won't even get the title shot. Maybe Usman will get stripped for missing 6 months or something like that. So we'll see what happens there. But it is what it is, man. Usman is looking like a very, very solid fighter and a guy who could hold that belt for a long time. But of course, we said the same thing about Woodley, who this was his 5th title defense, so he's definitely like top 4 or 5 best welterweights of all time. But I still think that he could potentially get himself back in there, maybe win the title back. But it's gonna take some extra mental strength, I think, for him to be able to beat a guy like Usman. Sorry about that, guys. I need some more water. And moving forward, we're going to talk about, of course, the main event. Jon Jones versus Anthony Smith. And I think that coming into this fight, just about every single person on earth who follows mixed martial arts was expecting this to kind of go the exact same way it did. Now, Anthony Smith was a massive underdog, and some people even call him the ultimate underdog because, realistically, nobody really expects him to do a whole lot against Jon Jones because, I mean, yes, he has power, but his chin isn't that great because he got knocked out middleweight. So imagine at light heavyweight. His striking isn't that great. It's good. I mean, it's not bad, but it's nothing special. He's just heavy-handed, really. His elbows are very dangerous. In the clinch, he's very dangerous. But Jon Jones thrives in all those situations, right? Whether it's on the ground with his ground and pound, whether it's on the feet with his in-boxing range because of his reach, and of course the fact that his kicks are very good as well. We saw a lot of those spinning side kicks to the body that I think really deflated Anthony Smith pretty early. And of course, in the clinch, Jon Jones with his own elbows, which is, I think he's definitely better than Anthony Smith everywhere, and even in the clinch, which is arguably Anthony Smith's best place to be. Jones is still much better than him there too. So I just think that Jones has too much for him. It doesn't matter where the fight goes. He's better than anybody in that weight class. It does not matter. I mean, Anthony Smith is a jiu-jitsu black belt, but I mean, I don't know how good that is, because having a jiu-jitsu black belt kind of can mean a lot of things. Like, you can be an elite level jiu-jitsu player and not get your black belt for 10 years. You know what I mean? Like, it can take you literally a decade or so, maybe even more, to get your black belt, depending on how good you are, how much you work, and who your coach is. Whoever your instructor is kind of dictates that. Whereas you look over here in Sardinia, in Italy, I have literally two people that went to high school with me. One of them was a black belt in karate by the age of 8 years old. 8 years old. At 8 years old, you're not even sparring. You have no actual competitive experience, really. So how the hell are you a black belt? I don't even know. I had another friend who also, by the age of like 10, was a black belt. So a lot of that just kind of depends on what system you're going through, who your coach is, and where you're doing it. Like, it depends on a lot of things. So Anthony Smith might be a black belt, but is he a true elite level black belt? Definitely not. Like, that's not me being insulting or anything like that, because as I mentioned with all these fighters, they would destroy me, and I don't know. I don't practice jiu-jitsu. I don't practice kickboxing. I don't do any of this stuff. I just watch it mostly because, as I just mentioned, they're black belts at 8 years old here. So why would I even sign up for one of their programs for kickboxing or whatever? And then you just, of course, it would destroy me. But I've been watching this for a long time, so I have the right to give my opinion. I think I have enough expertise, or not expertise, but enough knowledge of the sport to be able to criticize and give a constructive criticism. And that's just what I do here. I give my thoughts, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. And I think Anthony Smith, he isn't an elite level black belt. Like, we've seen him even at middleweight get dominated on the ground and stuff like that. And elite level black belts, they don't let that happen. Maybe they do against amazing wrestlers or stuff like that, but this is not a case of he got dominated by Jon Jones on the ground. It's a case of he's been dominated by quite a few people on the ground. So, it's just, I don't know. But regardless of that, everywhere, any place that fight went, Jon Jones was going to be in control the entire time. There was no, like I said, whether it's striking, whether it's in the clinch, whether it's on the ground grappling, it does not matter. Jon Jones is going to be better than Anthony Smith every single place. He has better physical advantages. He has mental advantages. I guess he has picograms in his favor if you're one of those haters too. And just in general, man, Jon Jones, the best fighter in the world. I don't care what you say. Jon Jones is the best fighter of all time. Like, it's either him or GSP. There's literally nobody else. There is nobody else. Anderson Silva, phenomenal fighter, but he didn't go out on top. I mean, he still has some stuff in him. We saw him against Stylebender. He's still a very, very good fighter, very dangerous, very elusive, but GSP went on top. He retired the first time as a welterweight champion. He came back, beat Michael Bisping, became the middleweight champion, and left again. So, on top. Absolutely on top of his game. And arguably, he could come back and even be the lightweight champion if he was able to cut weight, which, like he said, he was. So, who knows, man? GSP, Jon Jones. Who's the best? I don't know. Definitely let me know what you think, even on social media, in the comments down below. Just let me know, because that's a debate that I'm always interested in having. But I think it's Jon Jones. Like, as of right now, I think that Jon Jones, as a gifted, when it comes to talent and how gifted he is physically and all that stuff, I think that Jon Jones there's nobody that can even come close to matching him. He's just perfect in every way possible for an MMA fighter. So I definitely think that he has to have that respect given to him. And moving forward, I just don't think that anybody's really going to be able to stop him in light heavyweight, unless like Johnny Walker, who is a very, very talented. You just see he's heavy-handed as shit. The way he destroyed Misha Serkinov. He's just win every single fight like that in the UFC so far. He's 3-0. Maybe like a guy like Tego Santos, which I just don't see it, man. I just don't see anybody really being able to beat him unless he goes up to heavyweight. If he goes up to heavyweight, maybe fights Big DC, maybe. If he fights Ngannou, maybe. But I just don't really see, or even Stipe maybe. But I just don't see anybody really beating him at light heavyweight. And as long as he stays there and fights safe and continues to fight the way he fights, then I don't think anybody's going to beat him. I just think he's going to go down as the greatest of all time, 100%. And then, of course, you have to kind of look at the people at 205, and is there anybody who's going to really be able to test him? Like, he's already beaten Gustafsson twice. Of course, the second time was an absolutely dominant performance. He already beat DC twice. The second time was an absolutely dominant performance. So who's really left for him? Like, Ozdemir? No. Glover Teixeira? Nah. Anthony Smith? No way in hell. I mean, there's just not anybody there. And I think that the biggest thing for Jon Jones is that people criticize him quite a bit for that performance, but I think that he did everything he needed to do to dominate that fight. And just to put it into perspective, the referee took away 2 points. He took 2 points away from Jon Jones, and he still won comfortably. I think it was what? Let's see. It was 48-44. Every single scorecard was 48-44. Or was it 47-44 because he took away he would have been at 50. He was at 50, so yeah, it was 48-44. So that just goes to show you, man, like, they took away 2 points from Jon, and he still was nowhere near losing. And I will give Anthony Smith a lot of credit for doing the right thing and being a man in that situation. Like, a lot of guys would have taken the easy way out. I think Dana White said this, Jon Jones said this. A lot of people have said this, and like, Anthony Smith could have taken the easy way out and become a world champion by not continuing and having Jon Jones disqualified. That would have been the easy way out, and I don't think anybody would have necessarily complained about it, but it would have been the second time in Jones' career where he got disqualified, and of course, the only 2 losses in his career would be through something like that. And of course, the first one against Matt Hamill was, come on, like, nobody really thinks that should be illegal, but it is, and he still fucked up and did that and got himself disqualified. This one, I think that it would have been 100% justified to disqualify him because a knee-to-a-down opponent is still fucked up, and it doesn't matter where you are. Like, you need to know the rules, and of course, in the backstage before the fights, they always go over the rule set with you, so you know you can't do that, or you can do that depending on where you are. And that's on Jon Jones. Like, that is on Jones, and that's just another moment in time in his career where he's almost completely fucked himself. A lot of times he does completely fuck himself, and this time he got lucky that Anthony Smith was a real fucking warrior and made the manly decision to keep on going, keep on fighting, and try to win it in the correct fashion. So, hats off to Anthony Smith. He really is what his name says. People have been saying that a lot, but it is true. It is true. He does have a lion heart. So, much respect to the man. I just don't think he's really good enough to be competing with Jon Jones or the elite light heavyweights. Really, maybe even with the elite light heavyweights. Like, who knows? Like, apart from maybe Alexander Gustafsson, who can really beat him there? I don't know. Maybe Johnny Walker if he gets better over the next few years, and I don't think it's time to throw him against Anthony Smith. I think it's time to build up Johnny Walker, and Thiago Santos might be the next guy, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens because that weight class doesn't have a lot of competition, and there's really nobody for Jon Jones to really go after. And I guess we'll just have to see how things kind of play out. But as of right now, I'm looking forward to the next card, which is going to be headlined by Max Holloway taking on Dustin Poirier for the interim lightweight title, which I think is kind of bullshit, but I'm not going to complain about that fight at all. And of course, the co-main event is the other interim matchup between Israel Adesanya and Kelvin Gastelum. And I'm very much looking forward to both of those fights because we're going to see what Stylebender can do against a really, really gritty wrestle boxer like Kelvin Gastelum, who can do both, who's very, very dangerous everywhere, has pretty good cardio, and just in general, very, very, very dangerous fighter. And we'll see what Max Holloway can do at lightweight. Of course, it's a rematch against Dustin Poirier, who did beat him, 2013 or something like that. So they were both very young in their careers, and they both changed very much in their careers, and they both improved in very, very big ways. And the winner of this fight will, of course, allegedly at least, go on to take on Khabib Nurmagomedov for the undisputed UFC lightweight title, and it's going to be a hell of a fight. And I look forward to seeing either one of these guys really going on to fight Khabib. It's going to be very, very fun to see if one of those two guys can stop the Russian Mauler, the Bear Killer, whatever the hell you want to call him, the Eagle is his actual nickname. But I don't like the Eagle as a nickname. I prefer, the Bear Fighter, some trash like that. It's kind of, I don't know. I'm not gonna go into that. I'm not a Khabib fan, but that's for personal reasons. And I will go ahead and end this podcast like that. Hopefully you guys did enjoy it. If you did, definitely hit the like button wherever you're listening to it. I'm hoping to get this on SoundCloud and Podcast Republic and Google Play and iTunes and all that type of stuff. And hopefully have it up soon. I'm still working on that. I'm still very, very new to this type of stuff. So, and as always, I do want to say this is my second time ever recording an hour-long podcast on my own. So it's difficult. I'm not used to doing these long-ass monologues. I'm hoping that you guys are entertained. If not, then just, don't listen. Hopefully you will still tune in because I do think it's going to get better over time. I'm going to improve in every way, and hopefully you guys will be here for the long haul. But regardless, man, thank you so much to anybody who stuck to the end of this episode, and I'll see you in the next one.